Ambassador Kim Soo-jin walked slowly toward the center of the massive council chamber. Her black diplomatic uniform felt heavier than usual as she carried the weight of humanity's most important decision in 300 years. Around her, delegates from 47 different alien species sat in their specially designed seats. Some breathed methane. Others lived in water tanks, and a few existed as pure energy contained in crystal shells. The chamber had been humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Human engineers had designed it so that every species could attend meetings together safely. The air was filtered perfectly. The gravity was adjustable, and translation devices allowed everyone to understand each other. For 3 centuries, humans had made this impossible gathering possible. Soo-jin stopped at the speaker's platform. Her hands trembled slightly as she activated the universal translator. She had practiced these words 1,000 times, but saying them would change everything. "Honorable delegates of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice echoing through the vast space. "I speak today not just as Earth's ambassador, but as the voice of all human colonies across the galaxy." The Aquatic Federation representative shifted in his water tank, creating small bubbles that rose to the surface. The Silicon Collective's crystal form began glowing brighter, a sign of increased attention. Even the gas-breathing void dwellers stopped their constant movement to listen. For 300 years, humanity has served this council faithfully. Soo-jin continued. "We have translated languages that had no common words. We have solved disputes between species that could not even touch each other. We have built bridges where others saw only empty space." She paused, watching the alien faces around her. Some showed confusion, others concern. They had no idea what was coming. "We have done this work gladly, believing that we were building something greater than ourselves. A galaxy where all intelligent life could live in peace and cooperation. We believe that every species, no matter how young or small, deserved respect and protection." The HFY War leader, a massive creature covered in natural armor, shifted impatiently in his reinforced chair. His species had been pushing for this moment for years. 3 human colony worlds sat on top of the richest mineral deposits ever discovered. Those worlds needed to be emptied so the hegemony could mine them properly. Yesterday, this council voted to relocate the populations of New Sol, Terra Nova, and Harmony Station. Soo-jin said, her voice growing stronger. 3 worlds that humans have called home for over 2 centuries. Worlds where our children were born, where our ancestors are buried, where we build our dreams. The chamber grew quieter. Even the constant humming from the energy-based species seemed to fade. The vote was 31 in favor, 16 against. The hegemony will receive the mining rights they requested. The human populations will be moved to less valuable worlds, whether they agree or not. This decision was made without consulting the colonists, without considering alternatives, and without respect for human sovereignty. Soo-jin reached into her jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. The paper was simple Earth-made material, but its meaning would shake the galaxy. The Terran Federation has carefully considered this decision and its implications. We have concluded that this council no longer represents the values we believed in. We can no longer support an organization that treats entire populations as obstacles to be moved around for profit. She opened the envelope and removed a single sheet of paper. Therefore, effective immediately, the Terran Federation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. All human personnel will leave their positions within 72 hours. All human-operated systems will be shut down. All human colonies will suspend their council memberships. The chamber erupted. The Aquatic Federation delegate began making rapid clicking sounds, his species equivalent of shouting. The Silicon Collective's crystals flashed angry red colors. Several smaller species started arguing loudly in their native languages, overwhelming the translation system. Soo-jin raised her voice above the chaos. "We do not make this decision out of anger, but out of principle. We hope that our 3 centuries of service would earn us basic respect. We were wrong." The HFY War leader stood up, his massive form casting a shadow across the chamber. "This is unacceptable," he rumbled, his words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "Humans cannot simply abandon their duties. The Council will not permit this withdrawal." Soo-jin smiled coldly. The Council permitted the forced relocation of 3 million human civilians. I think you will find that turnabout is fair play. She turned to walk away, followed by the dozen human staff members who had been running the Council's daily operations. Deputy Ambassador Park Min-ho carried a data pad containing shutdown codes for critical systems. Cultural Liaison Lee Dun held files containing centuries of carefully negotiated agreements and cultural maps that made interspecies cooperation possible. As they reached the chamber doors, the arguments behind them grew louder and more chaotic. Without human translators to manage the conversation, old grievances between species were already surfacing. The Void Dwellers were making threatening gestures at the Crystal Singers, apparently over some ancient territorial dispute that human mediators had been quietly managing for decades. Sujin paused at the doorway and looked back one final time. The great chamber that had once been a symbol of galactic unity was descending into barely controlled chaos. She walked out and let the door close behind her. 3 centuries of human service to the galaxy had just ended. 6 months had passed since the humans walked out of the Galactic Council, and Trade Administrator Kim Ji-wook was having the worst day of his career. He sat in his office on the human colony world of New Busan, staring at reports that made his head hurt. The galaxy was falling apart, and everyone was calling him for help. His communication device buzzed again. This time it was the Aquatic Federation, their water-dwelling representatives speaking in rapid clicks and bubbles that his basic translator could barely handle. The Silicon Collective has broken the Crystal Harmony agreements. The aquatic being said, its voice distorted through the water-to-air communication system. They are mining in our sacred breeding grounds. This is an act of war. Jae-wook rubbed his temples. The Crystal Harmony agreements had been one of humanity's proudest achievements. 20 years ago, human negotiator Choi Eugene had spent 8 months living underwater with the aquatics and another 8 months in the Silicon Caves with the collective. She had learned both cultures so deeply that she could explain each species to the other in ways they could understand. The result had been revolutionary. The aquatics had perfect biological processes for growing crystals in water environments. The Silicon Collective had advanced crystal technology, but struggled with wet conditions. Together, they had created biocrystal computers that were now used throughout the galaxy. But Choi Eugene was back on Earth now, along with every other human diplomat. And without her constant maintenance of the relationship, old misunderstandings were resurging. Have you tried contacting the Collective directly? Ji-wook asked, though he already knew the answer. They will not respond to our communications. They claim we violated the deep water protocols, but we have done no such thing. We need human mediators to resolve this. I'm sorry, but all human diplomatic staff have been withdrawn from Council space, Jae-wook replied. Perhaps the Council's new AI mediation system can help. The aquatic being made a sound like water going down a drain, which Jae-wook's translator interpreted as bitter laughter. The machine does not understand the spiritual significance of breeding grounds. It suggested we simply use different water. It does not comprehend that sacred water cannot be replaced. After the call ended, Jae-wook looked at his growing pile of similar reports. The Void Dwellers and the Gas Giants were fighting over shipping routes that Human Logistics Coordinator Commander Oh Jin-woo had carefully negotiated to avoid both species' territorial sensitivities. The energy beings and the rock people had stopped all trade because neither could understand the other's communication methods without human translators. But the economic reports were even worse. Captain Shin Hai-jin, who now worked for the Human Colonial Authority, had sent him data that made his stomach turn. Galactic trade volume had dropped by 40% in just 6 months. Supply chains that had taken centuries to build were collapsing. The problem wasn't just that humans had been good at their jobs. The problem was that humans had been doing jobs that other species didn't even know existed. For example, the methane breathers produce incredible manufacturing components, but only at temperatures that would kill most other species. The heat lovers could work in those conditions, but they needed pure energy to survive, which the energy beings could provide. But the energy beings only traded with species that could appreciate their art forms, which required cultural understanding that only humans had developed. Human coordinators had spent decades building these complex chains of cooperation. They had learned each species' needs, preferences, taboos, and communication styles. They had created networks where dozens of different species could work together without ever having to directly interact with incompatible species. Now, those networks were falling apart. The methane breathers were trying to trade directly with the heat lovers, but neither species could survive in the other's environment long enough to negotiate. The energy beings were refusing to provide power because no one understood their poetry well enough to offer appropriate appreciation. Jae-wook's assistant, Lee So-young, knocked on his door. "Sir, we have another problem. The Galactic Medical Network is requesting emergency assistance." She handed him a report that made his blood run cold. The medical network had been another human innovation. Different species had different medical needs, but they also had different medical knowledge. The rock people were experts at treating structural damage. The plant folk understood biological healing better than anyone. The energy beings could repair spiritual trauma. Human medical coordinators had learned to match patients with the right healers and to translate between different medical philosophies. A rock person doctor could fix a broken bone better than anyone, but they needed human translators to understand concepts like pain or infection that didn't exist in their mineral-based biology. "How many are dying?" Jae-wook asked quietly. "The report estimates several thousand per day across council space," So-young replied. "Species are trying to treat themselves instead of seeking cross-species medical help. The crystalline healers tried to treat a fluid being yesterday and accidentally caused a complete molecular breakdown." Jae-wook closed his eyes. He had known this would happen, but knowing and seeing were different things. The humans hadn't just been diplomats and translators. They had been the glue holding impossible civilization together. His communication device buzzed again. This time it was a hegemony, probably calling to complain about supply problems affecting their mining operations on the former human worlds. He didn't answer. Let them figure it out themselves. General Yang Tae-hyun stood in the command center of Earth's Colonial Defense Force, watching holographic displays that showed the galaxy burning. 2 years had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council, and the reports coming in were better than his wildest dreams. The species that had voted to kick humans out of their homes were learning exactly what they had lost. His aide, Captain Moon Ji-hoon, approached with a daily intelligence briefing. "Sir, the Hegemony 7th Fleet is stuck in the Outer Rim. Their supply ships delivered food that's poisonous to half their crew members." Yang smiled grimly. The Hegemony had been so eager to mine the former human colonies. They had moved their biggest war fleets to occupy empty worlds, expecting easy victories. Instead, they had discovered that running a multi-species military was incredibly complicated. What about their mining operations on New Sol? Yang asked. "Complete disaster, sir. The automated mining equipment was designed for human operators. The Hegemony engineers can't figure out the control systems, and they accidentally triggered 3 cave-ins last week." Yang remembered New Sol well. He had been born there, in a small town surrounded by crystal mines that had been his family for 4 generations. The Hegemony had been so sure those mines would make them rich. They hadn't realized that human miners had spent centuries learning how to work with the living crystal formations without damaging them. "Sir," another officer called out, "we're receiving a distress call from the Void Dweller Merchant Fleet. Their ships are lost in hyperspace." Yang walked over to that station. The Void Dwellers were gaseous beings who lived in space naturally, but even they needed help navigating the complex hyperspace routes that connected the galaxy. Human astrogators had mapped those routes over 3 centuries, learning to account for the different physics that affected different species. "They're requesting emergency navigation assistance," the officer continued. "Apparently, they've been stuck in a hyperspace storm for 6 days. Tell them to ask the Council's AI navigation system." Yang replied coldly. The officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, they say the AI doesn't understand their species' unique hyperspace interaction. 3 of their ships have already been torn apart by dimensional stress." Yang felt a moment of sympathy for the gas-dwelling traders, but he pushed it aside. The Void Dwellers had voted to relocate human colonies. They had chosen their side. Captain Moon approached with another report. "Sir, the economic situation is getting worse. The Crystal Singers can't trade with anyone anymore. The Crystal Singers were one of the galaxy's most beautiful species. They communicated through musical harmonies that could drive other species to tears of joy. But they were also incredibly sensitive to sound pollution. Human acoustic engineers had designed special trading stations with perfect sound isolation, so the crystal singers could do business without being hurt by other species' normal conversation. "Let me guess," Yang said, "the replacement stations don't work properly." Worse than that, the council tried to save money by using standard construction. The first crystal singer delegation that visited was hospitalized with sonic trauma. They've declared all council space to be acoustically contaminated and have closed their borders. Yang nodded. The crystal singers produce some of the galaxy's most advanced harmonic technologies. Their computers use sound waves instead of electricity and were 1,000 times more efficient than anything else available. Without them, dozens of other species would lose access to the advanced calculation systems they needed for everything from navigation to medical diagnosis. "What about the medical situation?" Yang asked. Captain Moon's expression grew darker. "It's a catastrophe, sir. Dr. Cho Minyoung's reports from a medical monitoring network show that interspecies medical treatment has almost completely stopped." Yang remembered Dr. Cho. She had been one of humanity's most brilliant medical coordinators, able to translate between completely different medical philosophies of various species. The rock people thought of injury as structural damage to be repaired with minerals. The plant folk saw disease as an imbalance in life energy to be corrected with organic compounds. The energy beings treated illness as spiritual disruption requiring harmonic realignment. "How bad is it?" Yang asked. Conservative estimates put the death toll at 50,000 per day across council space. Species are trying to treat themselves instead of seeking help from others, even when they lack the necessary medical knowledge. Yang walked to the main display, showing the galaxy. Red zones marked areas of active conflict. Yellow zones showed regions with major economic disruption. Green zones indicated stable areas under human influence or protection. Most of the galaxy was red or yellow now. The green zones were clustered around human space and the territories of species that had withdrawn from the council along with humanity. "Sir," another officer called out, "the hegemony is requesting emergency assistance. Their mining fleet in the Crystalline Nebula has suffered massive equipment failures." Yang almost laughed. The Crystalline Nebula was one of the most dangerous regions in the galaxy. Human engineers had designed specialized equipment that could function in the nebula's reality-distorting environment. The hegemony had been so confident they could replace human expertise with their own technology. "What kind of failures?" Yang asked. "Their mining robots are phasing out of normal space-time. 17 ships have been lost to dimensional drift, and the survivors are trapped on a planet that keeps changing its physical laws." Yang turned away from the display. The hegemony had voted to throw 3 million humans out of their homes for access to mineral wealth. Now they were learning that some kinds of knowledge couldn't be replaced with brute force. "Send them our standard response." Yang ordered. The Terran Federation is no longer responsible for council space operations. Former council liaison Kong Minesio walked through the empty corridors of what had once been the galaxy's most important diplomatic district. Her footsteps echoed in the vast halls that used to buzz with activity from dozens of different species. Now, half the embassy buildings stood dark and abandoned, their alien occupants having given up on the failing Galactic Council. She stopped at a viewing window that overlooked the main plaza. 3 years ago, this space had been filled with beings from across the galaxy conducting business, making deals, and solving problems together. Today, she counted maybe 20 individuals scattered across the enormous area, and most of them looked lost and confused. Her communication device buzzed with yet another emergency call. This time it was Ambassador Park Yi-Jin from the Human Colonial Authority, calling from the independent world of New Harmony. "Minesio, we just received another desperate message from the Council," Yi-Jin said, her voice tired. "The environmental systems in the main Council building are failing again." Minesio sighed. She had helped design those systems during her years as a human liaison. The challenge had been enormous. Create a single building where 47 different species could exist comfortably. Some needed sub-zero temperatures. Others required heat that would melt most metals. Some breathed methane. Others needed pure oxygen, and a few existed in vacuum. The human engineering team had spent 15 years developing atmospheric processors that could maintain dozens of different environmental zones in one structure. They had used rotating gravity fields, selective atmosphere barriers, and temperature gradient systems that seem impossible to most alien engineers. "How bad is it this time?" Menesio asked. The Aquatic Federation's delegation almost suffocated yesterday when their water systems switched to the wrong chemical mixture, and 3 crystal singers were nearly shattered when their harmonic isolation chambers started resonating with the rock people's seismic communication systems. Menesio remembered the crystal singer who had been her closest alien friend, a being named Resonance of Morning Light. They had spent hours together learning each other's cultures, with Menesio teaching her friend about human music, while learning the complex harmonic languages of the crystal singers. Resonance had returned to her home world when the council started falling apart, along with most of her species. What about the translation systems? Menesio asked, though she already suspected the answer. Complete chaos. Yesterday, the energy beings accidentally declared war on the plant folk because the AI translator converted a greeting into a death threat. The plant folk mobilized their defensive spores before anyone realized the mistake. Menesio walked past the abandoned Human Cultural Exchange Center, where she had spent years teaching other species about human customs while learning about theirs. The building's windows were dark now, its carefully maintained cultural artifacts covered with dust. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Humans hadn't just been useful members of the Galactic Council. They had been the foundation that made the entire impossible structure work. Her friend, Dr. Lim Subin, had designed the communication protocols that allowed real-time translation between species with completely different sensory systems. How do you translate color-based language into sound for a blind species? How do you convert emotion sense into mathematical concepts for silicon-based minds? Subin had solved problems that most species couldn't even understand existed. Cultural anthropologist Park Eugene had mapped a complex web of taboos, traditions, and trigger points that allowed peaceful coexistence. She had discovered that the rock people's simple greeting ritual was actually a deeply offensive territorial challenge to the gas dwellers, and that the energy being's casual way of sharing personal energy could cause complete mental breakdown in telepathic species. Engineer Dr. Cho Min-young had designed hybrid technologies that let different species work together despite incompatible biologies. Spaceships that could carry methane-breathing pilots and water-dwelling passengers safely. Factories where crystal-based workers could collaborate with organic beings. Communication devices that could transmit between energy beings and solid matter species. Menesio's communication device buzzed again. This time it was Economic Coordinator Song Min-jae calling from Earth. "The trade situation is getting worse," he reported. "We're tracking complete economic collapse in 18 star systems. The Zephyrian atmospheric processors have failed in 7 different colonies, and they don't know how to fix them." Menesio wasn't surprised. The atmospheric processors had been joint human-Zephyrian projects. Human atmospheric scientists had provided the theoretical foundation, while Zephyrian engineers had built the actual machines. But the human innovations had been crucial for making the processors work efficiently in different planetary environments. "What about the medical networks?" she asked. Dr. Han Soyoung estimates that the death toll from medical system failures has reached over 200,000. Species are dying from treatable conditions because they can't access cross-species medical knowledge anymore. Menesio closed her eyes. She had helped establish some of those medical exchange programs. Watching them fail felt like watching her life's work burn down. "The Council is requesting another emergency meeting with Earth." Song continued. "They're offering territorial concessions, trade agreements, and formal apologies for the forced relocations." What did President Lee Dong-wook say? He's considering it. But he wants guarantees that any new agreement will be based on genuine equality, not just desperation. Menesio looked out at the nearly empty plaza one more time. The great galactic civilization that had once seemed so permanent was crumbling, but maybe something better could be built from the pieces. Something where humans would never again be treated as useful servants instead of equal partners. Ambassador Kim Soo-jin sat in the same conference room, where she had once received orders to evacuate 3 million humans from their homes. 5 years had passed since that day, and now the tables had turned completely. Across from her sat 12 desperate alien delegates, representatives of what remained of the once mighty Galactic Council. The delegation looked terrible. The Aquatic Federation's ambassador had lost the healthy blue glow that marked the species' well-being. The Crystal Singer representative's harmonic frequencies were weak and distorted. Even the mighty Hegemony War leader looked smaller somehow, his natural armor dulled and cracked. Ambassador Sujin began the lead delegate, a being from the ethereal symposium whose energy form flickered unstably. We come to you today to discuss the possibility of renewed cooperation between our peoples. Sujin glanced at her advisors. Negotiation specialist Yoon Hae-rim sat to her left, taking notes on a tablet. Cultural advisor Song Min-jae was on her right, his expression carefully neutral. Both had been with her during the original withdrawal 5 years ago. Cooperation, Sujin repeated slowly. An interesting choice of words. As I recall, the last time we cooperated, you voted to forcibly relocate our colonies. The hegemony representative shifted uncomfortably in his reinforced chair. That decision was regrettable. We now understand that it was based on incomplete information about humanity's role in galactic stability. Sujin almost smiled. Incomplete information. That was one way to describe it. Let me share some complete information with you, she said, activating a holographic display. In the 5 years since humanity withdrew from the Council, galactic trade volume has dropped by 78%. Interspecies conflicts have increased by 400%. The medical emergency casualty rate has reached over 1 million deaths. The delegates looked away from the horrifying statistics. They had lived through the collapse, but seeing it summarized so clearly was still painful. Meanwhile, Sujin continued, the 31 species that withdrew from the Council along with humanity have formed new partnership networks. These independent species alliance worlds have maintained stable trade, peaceful relations, and effective medical cooperation. Defense Minister Jung Woo-jin leaned forward. The difference is respect. ISA members treat each other as equals. No species gets to vote on whether another species can keep their homes. The Crystal Singer representative made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Through the translator, her words came out broken and desperate. Our people are dying. Our harmonic technologies are failing without human acoustic engineering support. Our children are being born with frequency disorders because we cannot maintain proper sonic environments. Economic Coordinator Bae Sujin consulted her tablet. According to our records, the Crystal Singers voted 37-0 in favor of human colony relocation. Your delegate's exact words were, human territorial concerns should not obstruct greater galactic prosperity. The Crystal Singers' harmony dropped to almost inaudible levels. We did not understand. We thought humans were simply useful. We did not realize you were essential. Essential, Sujin repeated. Now that's honest. You never saw us as partners or equals. You saw us as useful tools. And when those tools became inconvenient, you decided to move them somewhere else. The Aquatic Federation ambassador spoke up, his words creating bubbles in his water-filled helmet. We offer formal apologies for our past actions. We are prepared to provide significant territorial concessions, exclusive trade agreements, and technological sharing arrangements. Yoon Hae-rim looked up from her notes. What you're offering is essentially a bribe to fix the problems you created by treating us badly in the first place. The ethereal symposium delegates energy form pulse brighter. What would you have us do? Our civilization is collapsing. Entire star systems have gone dark. Species that traded peacefully for centuries are at war. Without human coordination, we cannot maintain the complex systems that keep our different peoples alive. Sujin stood up and walked to a window. Outside, she could see the lights of New Geneva twinkling in the evening darkness. 5 years ago, the city had been full of refugees from the forced relocations. Now it was the unofficial capital of the Independent Species Alliance. The old Galactic Council is dead, she said without turning around. It died the moment you decided that some species were more important than others, that some people's homes mattered more than others' profits. She turned back to face the delegates. But perhaps we can build something new, something better. The Independent Species Alliance is always open to new members. The hegemony representative looked confused. Members? But we are not asking to join your alliance. We are asking you to return to the council. The council that voted to kick us out of our homes? Song Minjae asked. The council that treated us like servants for 3 centuries? That council no longer exists. Su-Jin sat back down. If you want human cooperation, you can apply to join the ISA. Like any other species, you'll be evaluated based on your commitment to equality, mutual respect, and peaceful cooperation. The delegates exchanged shocked looks. They had come expecting to negotiate humanity's return as junior partners. Instead, they were being invited to join humanity's alliance as equals. The choice is yours, Su-Jin said. You can try to rebuild your old system of hierarchy and exploitation, or you can help us build something where every species has an equal voice. She gathered her papers and stood up. Take your time deciding. We've waited 5 years. We can wait a little longer. As she walked out, Su-Jin smiled. The galaxy would rebuild, but this time it would be built on humanity's terms. Or not at all.